Okay, everybody, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. So when I was in college, I sang in the university's men's glee club. It was one of the greatest experiences of my college career, and I would definitely say my entire life. We gave performances worldwide, and the sense of brotherhood amongst the various members of the glee club was truly incredible. Now, as it happens, several of the members of the club were gay. That didn't matter to me in the slightest. In fact, 4 of us got a house together my senior year, and I was the one guy who is straight. We didn't define ourselves by our sexual orientation. We were friends, we were brothers, and that's all that really mattered. You know, I'm so happy that in the United States, we have made great strides towards equality and acceptance for those in the LGBTQ community. And further, I'm glad that we are having conversations that gender is not necessarily a binary proposition. June in our country and worldwide is Pride Month, a time to continue to raise awareness about these matters. And so I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about what can we learn from our tradition? What can we learn from Judaism about pride? All right, Steve, if you would. Steve Solomon is passing out a sheet that we're not going to go in great depth, but I just wanted to share with you. Cantor, if you guys want one, Cooper.
Share.
Yeah, I got plenty. The Marlborough Jewish Center supports Keshet, an organization that works for the full equality of all LGBTQ Jews and families in Jewish life. Keshet is the Hebrew word for rainbow, in case you don't know. And on this really wonderful sheet that is on the Keshet website, keshetonline.org, they identify 7 Jewish values, guidelines for inclusive Jewish community. And again, this is our values that helps to build inclusion for people in the LGBTQ community. But to me, these are Jewish values that apply to every community. Anyone, if you want to build a community, you should really keep these 7 values in mind. And the descriptions are really simple but profound. The 7 Jewish values are kavod, respect, shalom bayit, peace in the home or in the synagogue context, b'tselem Elokim, that we are all created in God's image, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh, communal responsibility, we all have to look out for one another, Shmirat Halashon, how we use language, that we must be careful and sensitive how we speak with one another, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you should love your neighbor as yourself, and that means you should also love yourself and be proud of who you are. And then finally, al tifrosh min hatzibur, you should not separate yourself from the community. So all of these messages are speaking to people who might be themselves LGBTQ, or to those who are not, and those who should make sure that they feel welcome and empowered. This last idea, don't separate yourself from the community, that's a teaching from Pirkei Avot that Hillel taught. And the text here, the little explanation, says, when you feel different from others in your community, don't isolate yourself. Find allies and supporters who you can talk to. And if you know someone who is feeling isolated, reach out, be an ally and a friend. So it's a message both to someone who is LGBTQ and also to someone who is not, to make sure that the community is loving and accepting of every individual, of every member. So I'm proud that we as a synagogue support Keshet. You might have noticed in the entrances there's a little decal or sticker that says that this is a Keshet safe space, because we want to make sure that we advertise that we are open and welcoming to anyone who wants to come through our doors and worship with us. Now, in thinking about pride, One of the most difficult, and I believe one of the most misunderstood mitzvot in the Torah is in the book of Leviticus. And it's in chapter 18, it's verse 22. And it says, and this is the English translation, which of course is in and of itself a bit of an interpretation, but it says, do not lie, and it's speaking to Israelite men. Do not lie with a male as one lies with a woman. It is an abhorrence. This verse has been, on the surface, has been understood to mean that there's a prohibition against homosexuality. But I would question, does this verse really prohibit love between two men or two women? I think we have to understand this verse in its context in Leviticus chapter 18. If you look back at the very beginning of the chapter opens with the following verse: after the practices of the land of Egypt you will not do, and after the practices of the land of Canaan you will not do. Almost the entire chapter goes on to highlight various sexual practices that I suppose were practiced in Egypt and maybe in Canaan, where the Canaanites lived. And they were, a lot of the practices were incestual that are listed in that chapter. So, based on the context, I really don't think that Leviticus is against long-term, loving, open, committed relationships between people of the same genders. Instead, I think the Torah seems to be talking about sex in the context of non-Israelite religious practices, or abusive uses of power, or sexual contact outside established consensual relationships. My colleague Neil Joseph Levinger wrote about this passage, about Leviticus 18. The Torah is probably prohibiting the kind of sexual behaviors a contemporary Jewish ethic might posit as problematic for any religious and ethically sensitive Jew, gay or straight. And to me, this is authentic study of the Torah. Every verse of the Torah needs to be examined and understood, and not just looked at on the surface, but really understood in its full context. It's up to us to interpret the verses of the Torah. And I think, in my opinion, this is the proper understanding of this passage in this verse. And that is our jobs, by the way, as consumers of the Torah. We should not take anything about the Torah at face value. It is our job to study it, to parse the verses, to study past understandings, and to be inspired to create our own, to try and strive for the truth. If we're not doing that, then I would say we are not doing our job. And in this verse in particular, I think it's important to take a closer look at it, because again, I feel this is one of the most misunderstood verses of the Torah. So with that, again, Pride Month extends for the entire month of June. I encourage you to go to keshetonline.org, check out all of their resources that they have for the Jewish community, and we should strive to be as open and welcoming, as inclusive as we possibly can. Amen. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.